Camera 1 is recording. Camera 2 is recording.
We are going on a video audio bike ride where Rob is going to interview me about some ethical questions around photography and photojournalism.
Very interesting.
He
What
has
is
three
this going to be?
camera. Oh, it's probably going to be on CBS Sunday Morning someday soon.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, you boys have fun.
Yeah, boys and their toys.
Okay, camera 3 is recording. Could be overkill.
I don't know, Rob.
By the War Memorial and then go like Veterans Park and then go
Yeah,
down.
sure, we can do that.
How do I get there from
All right,
here?
follow me. Trying to think of the best way to do this. All right, you don't care. We'll just go. Here we
Yep.
go. All right.
It's an adventure.
It's an adventure. I don't remember the last time I was on a bike. Let's see, left-hand turn is this way, right?
No,
This
straight
way.
out.
So far, so good.
I'm going to do a little bit of an intro.
Yeah, please.
What we're doing, this is for what hopefully will be successful, or people might not watch YouTube channel, that right now I'm calling Riding with Rob.
Riding with Rob, I love that. And since I'm along and my name is Bob or Robert or Rob,
Right.
it could be
It kind of works.
Riding with
Yeah.
Rob squared. Yeah.
And so what I'm doing is I'm just doing this channel in which I'm having interesting conversations, hopefully, with interesting people.
Oh, well, I hope I fit that bill somehow.
Well, you do.
Okay, well, thank you.
So
Yeah,
the idea is to just have some nice conversations with a few different people
yeah, I like it.
and doing it on the road.
I like it a lot.
Part of it is we're not sitting here with a bunch of notes.
Right.
So it's a conversation. It's not the end all and be all.
Yep.
It's two people who are photographers who are talking about taking pictures, but taking pictures ethically.
Right.
But Bob, when I talk about ethics of photography, what comes to mind first?
Well, one is consent.
No.
I mean, there's certainly times when you're in the public domain taking pictures of people, places and things that you don't necessarily need consent. But then there are also times, I think, when, depending upon the setting and what you're photographing and who you're photographing, sometimes consent is a good thing to ask.
Yeah.
Especially if I am photographing a child, I always ask and always explain what I'm doing and why. And because I want to make sure that the parent or the guardian knows what I'm doing.
Right.
And I'm not going to post it. It's more about art. I'd like to send you the photo. And that makes a difference as well, too.
Right.
I think the other thing that comes to mind is altering photos and keeping the image, especially if it's a public gathering, or I've photographed a lot of the protest marches and things over the last couple of years, and it would be easy to alter the messages on signs.
Right.
Or
Are we
things.
going this way? Or?
I think we're going to go to the right.
Okay.
And so I think, when it comes to some aspects of photography, when I feel like I'm doing more of a photojournalistic type of a shot, or if I'm out doing street photography, I'm very careful about that because I want to represent the scene or the person or the gathering the way it's actually happening, and try to represent it in a way that shows the message, shows the meaning without trying to alter it in any way.
Right.
And that's important to me. Hi. I think today, with today's technology, it's so easy to alter images, change messages, and use the photojournalistic capabilities of photography for reasons that it was not meant to be. But that's just me.
I totally agree. A couple thoughts that I have on what you said is, one, it always kind of gets me how situational some of it can be, because
Yeah.
kids I always think about with, like, people will freak out
Yep,
if you're photographing kids,
right.
but at the same time, you can go down to Millennium Park
Yep,
in Chicago and shoot the kids in the fountain,
right,
and nobody thinks anything of it.
right.
It's sort of a permitted public space
It is,
in which they know it's photogenic, so they know their kids are going to get photographed.
right.
But it's one of the few places that you can actually go and photograph kids.
Yeah, I think, kind of back to your point, back to the location. I love, even though I haven't been there in 2 years, I love to go to New York City and do street photography.
Right.
One, I just feel totally anonymous there and
Yeah.
almost invisible.
Right.
And there, it's just pretty common to have people walking the streets with cameras. And I've landed on some really amazing opportunities. Got in the middle of Fashion Week
Yeah.
1 year. And
I remember those photos.
Yeah, that was really fun. It was really amazing.
You did a great job with those.
Oh, well, thanks. But, part of that too was I presented myself in a way that the people that I was photographing felt comfortable with me.
Right.
And I also think too that helped a lot. And I respected them and hopefully made them feel like, I was doing their craft, their art. Yeah, I'll let you go here. A service by photographing them.
Right.
And it's been interesting, a handful of the models that I photographed, we still follow each other on social media. Excuse me. And, it's really been a lot of fun to see so many of them grow
Right.
as well. So it gives me a connection to people that I'd never had the chance to meet otherwise. And go ahead.
I was going to say one of the reason I asked you to do this particular video podcast, however you want to call it,
Yeah.
is because I started looking at your photos, and I've photographed people for a lot of years, and I've done it in a number of countries, and I've done it for organizations and things, some including medical and other stuff.
Right.
And I've taught people how to do street photography and street portraits. So
Yep.
it doesn't take long to look at somebody's photo and go, okay, they like photographing people, they're willing to talk to them, they have, more importantly, respect for the subject.
Yeah.
And I can glance at somebody's photos, give me 3 photos, and I can tell you if you got the right kind of respect for the subject.
Yeah.
One of the things that I will always say is, if you think it's okay to go shoot a homeless person from across the street with a long lens, I can't teach you because I don't have the time to teach you the basic ethics
Right.
just as a person.
Right. That's right.
My question for you is, how long have you been doing photography?
50 years.
Yeah.
I started when I was a teenager and loved it, and then quickly started taking pictures for the local newspaper
Okay.
in a little town in Minnesota. And I loved that.
What was the little town?
Cannon Falls, Minnesota.
There you go.
There you
It's
go.
got to have a name like that.
The
We can go on the right side, I think.
The Cannon Falls Beacon was the name of the paper.
Oh, that's so classic.
perfect,
I love
right?
it.
And I did events and football games and basketball games and school plays and the fair and whatever came around, right?
Right.
And I loved it. I had a really incredible mentor and a couple mentors, but one of them was a fellow that taught photography at the University of Minnesota, and he lived at an airport outside the little town I lived in.
Yeah.
And he was really fascinating, and he taught me so much. We never shot together. We became friends. I used to help him with his car, and he'd answer my photography questions and have me look at people's work that I never would have found otherwise. And really, that's where my love of journalistic photography came along,
Okay.
and also black and white photography.
Right.
So it really helped me a lot. And I think about the lessons he taught me all those years back. But I think you're right when it comes to people photography and really kind of understanding them. I took a picture in Washington Square Park in New York a couple years ago
Yep.
of Mike the Pigeon Man. And Mike the Pigeon Man is actually in Wikipedia. He feeds the pigeons in Washington Square Park.
Okay.
And he's kind of a legend. And I knew I wanted his picture, but I wasn't sure how to get it,
Right.
because I didn't want a telephoto shot. I wanted to get closer to him, and I wanted to understand why he did what he did.
Right.
And so he sat down on the bench, and I sat down next to him, and he told me his story. And he told me how he got started. He introduced me to his pigeons. A lot of them had names,
Yeah.
and he knew them by their feathers.
Well.
And at one point, all the pigeons disappeared. And he pointed out that there's a peregrine falcon that lives in that park. And when the peregrine falcon comes, the pigeons all disappear.
Oh.
And so when they came back, they were on his shoulders, and he was feeding them food up to his face. And I got a phenomenal picture of him and a story behind it.
Right.
And I think that the picture really demonstrates, or the image rather, who he is and what he does. And so that's the kind of photography that I like to do.
Right.
I like to understand the story.
I have people's voices in my head
Yeah,
going, what are the pieces of a photo story?
right.
You know, are you getting the setting shot? Are you getting the, portrait? Are you getting the details? Are you getting all the different pieces? Sometimes it's easy to forget, especially like the wide setting shot.
Right.
Like if you're doing something, I should have taken a shot from the outside of the building or whatever. I think a lot of the basics of ethics, which is a deeper question, but comes from people's just their personality
Right.
and how they grew up in a lot of ways.
Yep. And I think also, excuse me, the generation too, right? I mean, I think the generation of photographers before me, for sure, and maybe two generations before that, once, when photojournalism started to become more popular and affordable for papers and magazines to print pictures, is when it became so powerful, and when the truth behind an image would often share in a more powerful way what that setting, what the situation actually was than words can capture.
Right.
And I was always fascinated by that. You know, I'm kind of a, I don't know, I guess I'm a baby boomer, but I grew up, you know, during the Vietnam War and a lot of the civil rights movement,
Right.
and, you know, studied Life, Look, Time magazine, everything that came into the house, and got to see some really pretty powerful and magnificent photographs from people that were photographing, you know, really difficult and horrific situations that,
Right.
and those photographs made a difference. And that was the thing that I wanted to do with my life. Life kind of got in the way, and I have no regrets of that, but I really wanted to become a photojournalist.
There is a ethical code for the National Press Photographers Association
Yep.
that I can link in the video.
Oh, yeah, I think that would be great.
That there are also, like other organizations have their different codes.
Sure.
It's just, I did some shooting with NGO in Uganda, and when you're doing medical,
Yeah.
that's different too.
Sure.
I was going out with medical professionals that were testing people to see if they were HIV positive.
Right.
And there was things I learned doing that.
Yep.
And because there were times where I knew who tested positive, but nobody else did,
Right.
and I couldn't react.
Right.
There are also times with other types of photography, like wildlife.
Yep.
Wildlife, one of the things with wildlife is, like, if you're doing a photo contest for wildlife, one of their rules tends to be the hand to man. Can you see the hand to man?
Sure.
Now that's for a photo contest.
Right.
But not photojournalism, and that's
Right.
changed also over the years.
Yep.
I was lucky enough when John Dominis from Life was in town,
Okay.
and Ann Hollister. Myself, there were two people who gave them the tour of Milwaukee, and Frank Lloyd Wright down in Racine, and we went to the Harley Davidson Museum. Do you know who the other person was?
No.
It was Cardi.
Oh, was it really? Oh, fun. Okay. Cool. My neighbor Cardi.
Yep. And I talked to John because John has a very famous photo of a big cat, forget what kind, leopard,
Okay.
with a baboon,
Okay.
but it was set up.
Oh.
And I was lucky enough to talk to him a little bit about it.
Yep.
Because the times were slightly different back then.
Sure.
It was still a little bit controversial, but not quite what it would be today.
Today. Yep.
And that's how some of these things change.
Right. Well, it becomes a progression of society and society's norms and mores that changes a lot of this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think right now we're going through a really big period of that societal change. And we're going to have a wide shot here, Rob.
That's okay.
Hey,
Right in front of Discovery World.
there
so
we
that's
go.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
See? That was intended.
That's great. I'm very careful, even with my nature images, even like I do a lot of sunsets out my window at night because I can, and they're pretty, and people like it, and I enjoy it, and but I try not to.
I enjoy it.
Oh,
just for
well,
the
thank you,
record.
thank you.
Yeah.
And I try not to alter them beyond what they really are.
Right.
And sometimes there's a temptation, obviously.
Right.
But I spent a lot of years in the dark room. And whatever I try to do with the tools in my mind that I learned in the dark room.
Right.
Exposure, contrast, different film types, paper types, those kinds of things.
Let's go left up here.
All right.
That way the lake and everything
Yeah.
will be behind you.
Great.
So,
And so to me, there's some ethical boundary around that as well too, and that means a lot to me.
yeah.
It's easier, I think, today to alter things. I keep hitting that bell. I kind of like it. In a way that might make them more dramatic and more pleasing, but maybe less realistic. Right.
From my standpoint, my rule of thumb has always been, I'm glad I got a forward camera, so I can.
Yeah. Cool.
My rule of thumb has always been, I don't care what you do in Photoshop, just be honest about it.
Exactly. Right. Gonna let him know we're coming by.
And that, there are so many things you can do. Here's my example of when I crossed a boundary and didn't care.
Yeah.
Okay. My wife Wendy has an Aunt Rosie, had an Aunt Rosie. She's
Okay.
passed away. But when Aunt Rosie was 90,
Yeah.
Aunt Rosie wanted a picture of a tree. The tree she wanted, she loved this tree, but it was behind a McDonald's.
Okay.
I took a picture of that tree.
Yeah.
I got rid of all the wires. I
Oh,
made the
sure.
building behind look good. I
Yeah.
got rid of all of the weeds. I got rid of everything because the picture I wanted was how Rosie sees the tree
Right.
and what she wanted to hang on her wall.
Right.
Never ever do any other that much. So we just go around.
No,
and
let's go down to the lighthouse. You
Sure.
got time? Let's
Oh,
go
yeah.
check it out.
I'm in no hurry.
All right. I think I got enough cycles left in me to do it.
Yeah.
I haven't been on a bike in a long time.
So for me, that was one case where I didn't care what I did.
Right.
But I'm also never, ever, ever going to show that photo to somebody without telling them the
Right.
story
Well,
about
sure.
just how much Photoshop is
Yeah.
involved.
Right? Yep. I agree, right? And again, I mean, I will take wires out sometimes, especially if it's a black and white picture or whatever. And, you know, back in the day in the darkroom, you dodge some of that stuff out. Do we want to go right on the road or stay on the path? What do you think?
We can brave the path.
All right. I'll keep my bell ringing skills intact here. Just as an aside, this is such a great park and such a great path. It's just amazing.
I love it.
Hi.
I take the Hank Aaron Trail down here,
Oh,
and it's
sure.
fabulous.
Yeah.
I just love it.
I had a second cousin who was a Great Lakes hand on an iron ore ship his whole career.
really?
Yeah, I was too little to really understand it all,
Yeah.
but it was fun to hear some of his stories. That'd be a fun thing to do, to be immersed on a ship. You were going to do that, weren't you, for a couple of weeks?
Well,
Or trying to?
yeah, I got all of the I got all of the credentials and everything to do it.
Yeah.
And the one guy that was going to help me do it had things going on, so we were going to do, okay, next spring
Oh, yeah.
we're going to focus on it, and then we had COVID,
Yeah, COVID.
not to mention my heart problems.
Yeah,
but
that little thing. I'm really careful about where I go usually with my camera,
yeah.
but there was a time, I think it was probably early 2002 sometime, that there was a big ship in dry dock down here. Do you want to turn up here?
Yeah, shall we turn right around and
Sure,
go back on
yeah.
the street?
Yeah,
then?
let's do that.
I'll let you go ahead.
All right. There was an iron ore freighter in the dry dock down here, and it was up high enough that the propeller was, I don't know, 2/3 out of the water,
Oh, yeah?
and it was beautiful. It was brand new. It was stainless steel. It was shiny,
Right.
and it was winter, so there was a lot of contrast, and
Oh,
the ship was kind of a cool gray color. And so I didn't see any signs, and I just drove my car down the dock and didn't think too much of it and got my picture. And then I had some company, And they wanted to make sure I wasn't a terrorist.
Yep.
But sometimes I did get asked off the track at Daytona once. I got a little too far. I had a pass,
Right.
and there was a gate that was open, and I got some great pictures of some motorcycle races.
Right.
And then a very kind man in a golf cart came up to me and said, "Should you be here?" And I said, "Probably not." And he said, "How about if I give you a ride back to where you should be?"
Right.
And I said, "That would be fine."
There's a certain amount of not knowing where the boundaries are.
Right. Yep.
And if you find out you crossed one, be polite.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, you're always trying not to, but once in a while it happens.
Right. I did, probably the worst experience I had was at Road America, of all places.
Oh, yeah?
I was up there on a Thursday for vintage motorcycle race weekend.
Okay.
And, there's probably 12.
I like the one wheel.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. There were probably 12 people up there besides me that day. And so I was out on the paths, and on a couple of the corners there's television towers that particular day they were unlocked.
Yeah.
And I just very safely found myself not up in a tower, but more out on kind of a boom thing.
Right.
Yeah, that didn't work either.
Yeah.
Yep. But there were no signs, and there were nothing that said don't do this. But that's the way it went.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I found, and you know this, since I started shooting all Leica, it's really changed my interaction with my subjects, because I don't have a zoom lens.
Right.
I don't have a long lens. It's very manual. It's very how do I want to say this? It's futzy, but I've grown used to it now.
Yeah.
And I take far fewer pictures. And I think I take better pictures, especially pictures of people, than I have before.
That's one thing I wondered, is because it seems like your pictures of people get better.
Yeah.
You're honing skills that you already had.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you because you have to focus, and I don't shoot in any kind of auto mode.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to be cognizant of what an exposure might look like before I get there.
Right.
And I'm cognizant of whatever I'm taking a picture of's time and light. And that's had a big difference on how I approach people and how I approach subjects. And I feel better about it, even as a street photographer, than I did before. Because I feel like I'm gaining consent in some way.
Right.
And I also think that, sadly, in this day and age, and maybe this doesn't sound right, but some people know what a Leica camera is.
Yeah.
And those that do, if I'm asking to photograph them, they have a little better respect for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Than if I'm up there with my phone.
Right.
Or something else. And I hate to be that kind of snobbish about it. I don't mean it that way.
But they know you're more serious.
Right.
Than,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's made a difference too in certain circumstances. Not always, but in some certain settings. I was in a restaurant in Tribeca a couple of years ago, and sitting at a table next to me were 3 women, and I couldn't tell if they were related, but it was the eldest person's birthday,
Okay.
and she was very unique. They came and she opened up her birthday present, and it was a crown of skulls made out of different gemstones.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I thought, I have to get a picture of this. And so I had my camera with me, and I asked if I could take a picture. And what turned out to be her daughter said, absolutely. And she had her camera with her as well.
Okay.
And she was shooting a Fuji,
Right.
and she then introduced herself, and she's a very famous rock and roll photographer
Oh,
who did punk rock scene and a lot of other stuff in the 80s.
right.
And I don't know what the reception would have been had I asked if I was trying to do it with my cell phone,
Right.
right? So I'd like to think it was just my style, but it probably was more than that.
But one question, my method, and I feel like yours is probably incredibly similar.
Yeah?
My method for doing street photography and street portraits is I'll go out and do the street photography, and what I will do is I will like take somebody's picture, possibly without them seeing me, but I'm also in shutter click range, and they almost always know I'm there. And then if I find I react pleasantly,
Yeah.
and then if I find them interesting, I'll go up and talk and
Sure.
do street portraits.
Yep.
My feeling kind of is that the people who don't, this is controversial for some people. I feel like there's a lot of people who say, oh, I'm not interested in walking up to somebody and taking their picture. And I think that's valid at times. I think a huge percentage of those people are afraid to take somebody's picture
Right.
and don't want to admit it.
Right.
To me, it's the street photography, street portrait equivalent of, oh, I'm a natural light photographer, which means I don't know how to use flash.
Right. That's right. And speaking of which, I got to get your picture while we're on this little adventure
Oh,
here.
sounds good.
And one of the things that's amazing about this Leica camera, other than it being black and white, is that it's totally silent.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there is no shutter click. So you could be much more, whoops, other than ringing your bell,
Right.
you could be very silent about
you-
it.
if you
if you need to
Yeah.
be or want to
Yeah.
be. I took a picture just this weekend of a bride coming into the restaurant with a whole big bouquet of balloons.
Oh,
And the sun was setting from the west, so I was shooting directly into the sun. I had only one frame, and I didn't know what the situation was until I rounded the corner. I had seen the balloons, and I
Yeah.
got a great photo. And she laughed and smiled, and I said, would you like this photo? No, there's going to be plenty more, right? Now, I would have loved to have been able to send it to her because it was very candid and very casual. And I'll oftentimes, I had some cards made up with my social media stuff on it.
okay.
And so if I'm out, especially in a different city, or even if I know that I'm going to go out for the day, I'll bring them along. And if I take a picture and somebody wants it, I'll give them my information and send it to them and post it to them.
Right.
And I've liked that too. And I've met some really great people that way.
Yeah.
And I feel better about doing that.
Yeah, and aren't some of those interactions just marvelous?
Oh, they are. They are. I went out on the Dennis Sullivan probably 2 years ago about this time with a dear friend. And, it was my camera, not just taking pictures, but it was my camera that broke the ice with the crew.
Oh, yeah.
Because there were a couple people there that knew about my Leica and wanted to play with it and try it. And so, again, I had to take some time with them, but we're still friends.
Yeah.
And I see their adventures.
That's
I
cool.
see them sailing on tall ships around the world.
Nice.
And I don't know if that interaction would have occurred in the way that it did had the camera not broken the ice. Now that doesn't work with everybody,
Right,
of course,
right.
but
And part of that is something to break the ice
Right.
is an important thing.
Yep.
A lot of times. I mean, it's kind of like I always say, if you find something interesting about somebody, go tell them.
right,
If it's negative, think about your own motives.
right.
But a lot of times, just like, I love your hat.
Yeah,
Can I
yeah,
take your
exactly.
picture?
I there was somebody there that
No.
you see, you got me. You do it
My-
so well.
But that's just it. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my view is, like, people say, well, I'm so nervous walking up to somebody and taking their picture. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, I always am.
Yeah.
I'm always afraid of intruding.
Yeah.
But 99.99% of the time, it ends up this wonderful interaction.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a man in my building who he and his wife, he is still alive, his wife passed away, were real pioneers of civil rights in Milwaukee. And she actually worked in the Clinton administration
Okay.
for on education for minorities. And I was coming home one day from a walk a little over a year ago, or not quite a year ago, I guess, right after Joe Biden had been named the president finally.
Mm-hmm.
And Ruben was a big supporter, and I made his portrait outside the building, and he was doing thumbs up.
Yeah.
And excuse me, it captured his emotion and his spirit, and
Right.
and I showed it to he and his family, and they just were, that's Dad, right? But we had a conversation about what had happened that day and why it was so important to him, and then he posed, and it was really amazing.
When you capture somebody like that, the one thing I never expected as somebody who took pictures of people, and some of these are people that I met taking their picture.
Yeah.
The one thing I never expected was how many of my photos would be used for funerals.
Oh, sure. That's true.
It's a great feeling when somebody goes, we want to use that because, like a sister of somebody goes, we want to use that because we feel like that's the picture that captured their personality.
Right.
That's wonderful, but at the
Right.
same time, it's a mixed emotion. It never occurred to me that would really be how many times that would happen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You know?
Well, do you want to carry on?
Yes.
Should we head up towards the U.S. Bank building?
Sure.
And then I can return my bubbler bike. And
Perfect.
That's probably about an hour's worth of time.
Yeah.
And you can get on your merry way before it gets nasty.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice blustery day
It
in
is
Milwaukee.
a nice blustery day. And I think, too, any day, excuse me, on Lake Michigan, I'm so blessed to live right downtown here, and you're not far. I mean, it is really amazing, and to see what the city has done with the lakefront and has kept it so wide open for people
Yeah.
to access in a big, big way, and in a big stretch of the
Right.
lake. It's amazing. So, shall I lead
Yeah.
on? This is great, Rob. I like this idea. It's kind of the having coffee in cars with Jerry Seinfeld, only on a bicycle with Rob. I like it.
I'm not as funny.
Oh, I think
But-
you're pretty talented.